Okay. So yes, that is the joke that Josh does 3 chapters whenever Doug is sick. We're doing, it's a long paragraph. We're doing a paragraph. But I decided it's been a long week. I really need to have school tomorrow. Please pray. We're in Matthew 25. We are going to be looking at the parable of the talents. That's probably what it's labeled in your Bible. I do want to just take a moment and take a step back and again look at this overall context, because there's going to be some ideas and phrases that pop up in here that we're supposed to catch a hold of and connect backwards to some things that we have been doing. And really, this part of the narrative here in the Passion Week, we are still on a sequence that started all the way back in chapter 21. That really starts with the very, very beginning of chapter 1 with the triumphal entry. And Jesus comes in. The people of Israel declare him to be the Davidic messianic king who's going to deliver them. The Pharisees are all upset about this because the kids are like shouting this stuff. And from a culture perspective, everybody else is supposed to shout back. And they're like, we ain't shouting that. Get them to be quiet. And Jesus is like, nope. And then he cleanses the temple, again, which is a very, very big deal. He has cursed the fig tree, which represents the spiritual leaders. They've showed up and say, hey, you came in yesterday and flipped over tables. How do you have this authority? And Jesus made him look dumb in front of the people. And then he taught 3 parables that were all basically saying, the time of judgment has come upon you, religious leaders, and God is going to judge you, and he's going to take away the kingdom and give it to somebody else. And so then they're like, okay. They try to get him in trouble with the government, and he makes them look dumb. Then the Sadducees come and try to make him look dumb before the people, and that backfires. And then in front of all the people, a lawyer of the law confirms Jesus' interpretation, and then Jesus flips it all back around on all of them, and instead of them questioning him, he questions them, and they can't answer. And then in 23, in light of all that, he turns to the crowd and declares, woe upon the Pharisees 7 times, and asks the question, how can you guys be saved from hell? And I am going to come in judgment upon this generation. And so then they're walking out, and the disciples, who are probably feeling pretty good about themselves at this point, and they're looking around at the temple, and they're probably thinking like, hey, this is going to be our temple here pretty soon. Jesus said he's going to come judge these guys. They're going to get thrown into Gehenna, just like the false prophets of old. Well, who's going to take over the religious leadership after Jesus? Well, I mean, it's us, right? He's already said that we're going to judge angels, and we're judging the 12 tribes, and woo! And they're all like, hey, isn't this temple great? And Jesus is like, oh yeah, it's going to be completely destroyed. And he walks off. And so he gets to the Mount of Olives, and they're like coming in and be like, hey, about this temple being destroyed thing. And Jesus has been teaching about when he's going to come in judgment. And he said, okay, yes, I'm coming in judgment, and the temple's going to be destroyed, but that's not going to be like the end. And I can give you signs and warnings about me coming in judgment upon the religious leaders, but I can't tell you about the end because only the Father knows when that comes. I don't even know when that's going to come. But you don't need to know when it comes. Instead, you need to be ready. And he gives them this little parable at the end of Matthew 24, which we've already talked about, but I'm going to read it again. Matthew 24, verse 45. Who then, so this is after verse 44, therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom his master set over his household, to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is the servant whom his master will find doing so when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all of his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master's delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and eats and drinks with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day which he does not expect him, at an hour he does not know, and will cut him to pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And again, Doug talked about this phrase, the weeping of gnashing of teeth. If you haven't looked at it, Matthew 8:12, Matthew 13:42 and 50, Matthew 22:13, and Luke 13:28. All of these passages, Jesus uses these terms, and he makes it clear that this is Gehenna, this is hell. And he says that servant's going to be put in place with the hypocrites. Okay, well, who are the hypocrites? The Pharisees. We just did this in chapter 23. He declared in those 7 woes that woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. So again, remember, he's already said, the Pharisees, I'm declaring judgment upon them. They're going to get cast into Gehenna. Now, there's going to be these unfaithful servants who are not being faithful, and they are going to share the same fate as the Pharisees. Okay, and then Jesus does this thing here where, I'm going to say 3 parables. We'll see how it all works out at the end, where he's going to take this idea, and he's going to teach 3 parables, and he's going to do it, and it's a very similar thing that we saw in Luke with the parable of the sheep and the coins and the prodigal son, where he's got this point, and it's really important. He's going to try to make the point, and he's going to teach through this, and each time he's going to kind of bring some more detail, or he's going to nuance it in some way. Like back in Luke, we started with 100 sheep, but then we went to 10 coins, and then we went to 2 brothers, and it kept the focus kept getting tighter. And it's not just if there's 100 and one goes away, but even if there's 2 and one goes away, the Father wants that one back. That whole idea. So he's going to do something similar here. He's going to expand on this idea, and he starts with the 10 virgins. Okay? And the parable, and Doug looked at this last week, and it's all just about the preparedness piece. Okay? They're all invited to the wedding. They all have their lamps. Those lamps are all filled with oil. Those lamps are all lit. And even they all became drowsy and slept. The difference was some of those thought ahead and thought, well, maybe the bridegroom's going to take longer than I thought. I better bring some extra oil. Because I don't know when he's coming. And since I don't know when he's coming, I need to be ready no matter when he comes. Now Jesus we're going to do this whole thing again. But we're going to go a little bit deeper, and Jesus is going to add a little more detail. And although we're going to be hitting the same point, we're going to bring something else into it. And then all of this is going to happen again when we get to the end of the passage. Okay? So everything Doug talked about last week, all that applies. What we're looking at here is, okay, what's the new nuance that Jesus brings to the parable? That he's going to re-emphasize the whole idea, but he's going to throw something new on the table for us. And that is going to be the parable of the talents. So I think I would like to just read through the whole thing. It's kind of long, but we'll kind of get it into our brains and then start picking it apart a little bit. So here we go. Verse 13 was the conclusion of the last parable. Watch, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. So you need to be ready all the time, no matter what the day or the hour is. For, yeah, so we're connecting, it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, when he who had 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast that worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is one of the longer ones that we have. This is actually not the first time that Jesus kind of uses this theme of a master and servants and money to make a point. He did it back in Luke. In Luke 19, prior to the Passion Week. That one in Luke 19, it's got a little more detail and has a few more lessons, but Jesus has taken this teaching and he's kind of tightened it up to apply to what it is, the specific lesson that he's kind of drawing here. And so this time, we have the same kind of thing. We have someone, and they're going off on a journey. And the implication is, well, it even says that it's going to be a long time before he comes back. We don't know specifically if the servants know exactly when he's coming back. But, I mean, they know he is coming back, and he's gone for a while. Okay? And so, we're setting a scenario. He's calling his servants forward. That's actually the best translation of that is slave. The ESV kind of footnotes it, but that's a charged word, so they're softening it a little bit. But these are people of his household, and he's going away, and so he's calling these people of his household, and he is giving them his property. And so we have the 5 talents. We have the 2 talents, and we have the 1 talent. The talents have come up before, Matthew chapter 8, so we talk about these. But a single talent is about 20 years' wages for your typical day laborer. So this is a very significant amount of money. So it's kind of a big deal. We're all supposed to recognize that, like, wow, this is a lot of money. This is a big deal. This would be like, Elon Musk is going on vacation and he's like giving, this guy, okay, you're getting $2 billion, you're getting $1 billion, you're getting $500 million. We're supposed to be like, whoa, okay. And so then the servants are going to go do their thing, okay? And if you've been a part of church for a while, and we just read it, you know how this story goes. Okay, we got 5 of them. He's going to make 5 more. The guy with 2 is going to make 2 more. The last guy's not going to make any money. There's other kind of little nuances and details that I think are intentional and they kind of get picked out here that bring to light some of the newness that Jesus is adding to this. Okay, so we have this astronomical amount of money. Even the guy that got 1 talent, that's 20 years for minimum wage, basically, to put it in the nomenclature. And it says in verse 15, it says, to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to what? His ability. Okay, man, these are bondservants. They're members of his household. These aren't random duders off the street. But these are people that have responsibility in his household. That's the cultural context. And he knows who they are. He knows what they've done. And in some way, he's evaluated that, okay, this guy over here has the ability to properly handle 5 talents worth of my property. And this guy over here, he can handle 2 talents. And this guy over here, he can handle 1 talent of my property. So the master is assigning to the servants responsibility according to, at least in his mind, what they are able to do. It wasn't like a test of, okay, I'm going to give everybody the same amount and see who does best. He knew, or he had an idea of what these individuals could handle, and according to what they could handle, he gave them responsibility. Okay, so this is a reasonable responsibility that the master is putting forward. This is not a competition. This is not a test. This is not an evaluation. This is, I'm leaving. When I'm gone, I'm not going to be able to manage my stuff. I need somebody else to manage my stuff. These are my bondservants. Based on their ability, I'm going to divide up my stuff. And kind of the idea even is kind of like his property consists of 8 talents worth of stuff. And he's dividing all of that amongst these servants and saying, okay, you guys are going to take care of my stuff while I'm gone. And so we then have these servants that are laid out for us, and they're going to fall naturally into 2 groups that we're supposed to say, oh yeah, we're going to have the servants that go out, and they're going to do what with their talents? They're going to make more money. They're going to double the investment, actually, is the idea. And then you're going to have a servant who does not do that. And remember, prior to this, his master had determined that this servant can handle 1 talent of my property. That was the evaluation. And so we do this. What I find to be interesting is, remember the theme here is we don't know when the master's coming back. So the first servant, in verse 16, it says, he who received the 5 talents, what did he do with his money? He went at once and traded with them. Okay? He doesn't know when his master is coming back. So because he doesn't know when his master is coming back, what is his attitude about fulfilling the responsibility to which he has been given? I don't know when he's coming back, so I'm going to go do this thing. And again, there's that sense of preparedness, again, that we got like from those first 5 versions. Like, I don't know when the bridegroom's showing up, so just in case he doesn't show up, I'm going to get some more oil. The servant, I don't know when my master's coming back, so I better get to the job of doing what I'm supposed to do. He's going to go out and he's going to make 5 talents, which is great, but like that's what he was supposed to do. His master gave him 5 talents because that's what he could handle. His ability was he could do this. Okay, and so he goes off and he does the thing that the master expected that he would be able to do. He made more money. He reproduced the profit, whatever. Okay. All right. So also, verse 17, he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. And again, the so also implies that the same thing that first servant did, that he went at once, that the second servant did that as well. And so we have 2 servants who had different amounts of resources because they had different ability. This was understood by the master. But they did what was expected of them. That which the master thought they were capable of, they were capable of. They took the resources, they made more money. They did it they didn't waste time. They went and they did their thing. And they even got their return in such a way that they could show that as evidence to the master when he arrived. Okay, the last servant, who was given a talent, because that was according to his ability, it tells us that he went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Okay, and he stands in contrast to the other two servants, that's the way parables work. We're going to get to the end, and the question is going to be like, who do you want to be? And so we got this other, he's doing something different. We don't know why he does this yet. It's going to come up a little bit later. Okay, but this is what's kind of laid out for us. Okay, so the master comes back, verse 20, verse 19, and he's settling accounts. Verse 20, and he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. Here's what happened. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Okay. And so here in this response, there are flags that are supposed to be jumping out for us. Because there's phrases that Jesus is using here that he has used before. Okay, and we've talked about those. Okay? So, you have been faithful over little, I will set you over much. Okay, have we heard this before? We have. Jesus has talked about being faithful over little, and if you're faithful over little, then you be set over much. Particularly in what specific context did Jesus talk about that? When he said little, what was the little that he was talking about? And it's interesting how it relates here. It was money. Jesus was saying that if you can be faithful with money, which God the Father doesn't really hold in high regard, because he doesn't really worry about money that much, then the Father will entrust you something that is important to him. And Jesus is pulling that teaching back in here, which is really interesting because Jesus here is talking about an astronomical amount of money. But again, in all of Jesus' teaching, is God impressed by 8 talents? What is it? 160 years minimum wage. In the grand scope of the kingdom and God the Father, that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it is for us, but for God, who cares? Money, he's not worried about money. And so Jesus is playing into this whole, faithful, money's a little thing to be faithful with, and being faithful with more. But again, he's connecting this. He's saying, look, here was this servant. The master gave him monetary things. And he was faithful with those monetary things. So what is that servant what's the master going to do with that servant? He's saying, you were faithful over little, I will set you over much. I am going to take you, my servant, who met my expectations with what I gave you based on your ability, and because you were faithful, I'm going to set you over something that's more important. And again, this guy, 5 talents, 100 years minimum wage. But the master said, oh, that was little. But because you were faithful, I'm going to set you over something that's more important. Enter into the joy of your master. And again, that entering in, what is it that Jesus has been calling people to enter into? Basically, this whole gospel, but has been emphasizing, and just told the Pharisees back in 23 that they're not making it into. The kingdom. Okay? So we have the servant who, the master leaves, the servant gives him something that, again, in the scope of the kingdom is very little. It's only 100 years minimum wage. According to that person's ability. The master's like, based on my understanding of this guy, he can handle this. That servant went out and did the work. Didn't know when his master was coming back, but he did what he was supposed to do. He met those expectations, and now he is entering into the joy of his master, and he's going to be responsible for something that's more important than money. Okay, and these all weave through Jesus' teachings up through the gospel. Okay, and then we got our second example with a guy with 2 talents. Verse 22, and he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents, and here I've made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And what's great, when you're looking at parables and you're looking at different characters, one of the important things is to look at differences. There is one difference between the first servant and the second servant. Everything else that the master says, well done, you're good, you're faithful, I'll set you over much, enter in the joy of your master. All that's the same. What's the one thing that's different? The amount. Okay, but again, what was the amount based on? Their ability. But even the guy with the 2 talents didn't have the same level of ability as the guy with the 5 talents. But he got 2. He was faithful. He did what he was supposed to do. And the reward, or the statement, the acclamation that's given is the same. Now, and again, this isn't real. It's a parable. So, I'm not implying that this somehow that reflected in the reward, because there is no reward. It's a story. You made it up. But again, the fact that the master verbalizes the same praise of the servant, it is important. You had 2 guys, and they were given different responsibilities, but they both did what they were supposed to do. They were both commended by their master. They were both going to receive stewardship over something that was more important, and they were both entering into the joy of their master. He didn't say that, well, you only made 2. Why didn't you make more like this other guy? Because that wasn't the expectation for the second servant. The master knew who this guy was, what his ability was. He gave it to him according to his ability. The guy was faithful, and he was rewarded. And he's given the same praise as... So again, the amount of money that they made isn't what is supposed to be our attention drawn to here, but it's the... I don't know what word I'm looking for, but it's the praise of the master. These guys were faithful. They were good. They're going to get more responsibility over something that's important, and they are going to share in the joy of the master. All right? And so they are in the good category. Okay, now we're going to get the other guy. So, verse 24. He also had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. And he comes forward and he says, Master, basically, I was afraid of messing this up, so I did nothing. Here you go. I didn't lose you anything. What's really interesting here is, and people debate about what's going on with this phrase, but let's just go with taking the parable at straight value. And we learned something about this master right here. He is a hard man. He reaps where he did not sow, and he gathers where he scattered no seed. Okay. Because of this, that third servant was afraid. Okay, now, again, in the context of bondservants, in the context of the household, is there anything that this third servant knew that those first 2 servants didn't know? So, he's a hard man. The first 2 servants knew that. Okay, what was their response? I'm going to go do my job. The third servant had a very different response. I'm afraid of messing this up. And again, within the context, how did the master feel about his money? He said it's what? It's little. Was the master worried about them losing the money? I don't think so. I don't think we're supposed to get that intention, especially because he gave it to them according to their ability. He knew this guy could only handle 1 talent, so he only gave him 1 talent. Okay? And so, like, in light of, we see this, you have the 3 servants, they're all bond servants, they're all part of the same household, they have the same master. The master gives to them according to their ability. This isn't a test to see if the 3rd servant's going to do what he's supposed to do. The master's like, he can handle a talent, I'm going to give him a talent. But you had 2 servants who, in light of what they knew about their master, decided, you know what I need to do? I need to take what he's given to me, and I need to go and be a good steward of it. They had that ability. That's what the master thought. They fulfilled. This last servant was like, I am afraid that if I mess this up, this is going to be bad for me. And he drew the wrong conclusion about the master. He thought that the master cared more about his money than he did, and that it would be a safer scenario for him to just return that 1 talent. And so this is his plan. And we find out this backfires on him. Verse 29, basically his master said, well, if this is the way that I am, you should have done something different. Because within that culture, there was a surefire way to make a return off this. He could take it to the moneylender. And again, this is, even though, again, it's 1 talent, this is still 20 years minimum wage. Like, even if you're only getting 0.5%, you're going to make some money off this, okay? And so the master's like, look, if you were really afraid, you still could have done something that you would have earned money. And you still could have done what it is I told you to do. But you didn't. And so these guys over here, they're good and faithful. But this guy's wicked and slothful. Saying it wasn't because you were afraid. It's because you're wicked and you're lazy. And this guy, here's what's going to happen. Verse 28, take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. So this guy had, under his stewardship, 20 years minimum wage. And now that is being taken away from him. That is an astronomical sum of money. And it's going to the person who was faithful. And now that guy's going to have 11 talents. And he is going to get cast into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, he's going to end up where the Pharisees are. And so now Jesus, we arrive here at the end, and we have that who do you want to be moment. Because, and this is, well, I'll just flip over to 1 Corinthians. We'll spend a few minutes in there, and then we'll wrap this thing up. The Luke 19 parable is also about this, plus a little bit more, so I would encourage you to check it out. But go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Okay, first Corinthians chapter 12, verse 4. Now there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are a variety of service, but the same Lord. And there are a variety of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. And you probably familiar, you can read starting verse 12, and he's going to go down, he's going to talk about we're all part of the same body. So, like, Paul is saying, hey, you know what? There's a bunch of different gifts. There's a bunch of different offices. God works differently in people's lives. But guess what? We all have it. And we all have it for the common good. I mean, you may be an ear, you may be an eye, you may be a hand, you may be a foot. What's important is we're all part of the body. We've all been given something by the Master. And if a hard master who reaps where he doesn't sow and does that other thing that I can't remember can correctly judge the ability of his servants, how do we think that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are going to do? Are they going to be able to correctly judge our ability and to give us the gifts that are appropriate to who we are and to call us to the offices that are appropriate to who we are and work in our lives according to who we are? Did our Master give us according to our ability? Yeah? Okay, so what servant do we want to be? And I think this is important. And again, I'm going to be flipping over to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And Doug talked about this last week, and I'm going to reiterate it again. I don't think that this parable in Matthew 25 is about salvation. I don't think it's soteriological. Okay, I'm Calvinist, 5 points all the way. Perseverance of the saints. If the Holy Spirit has changed your heart, there's going to be evidence of it, and you can't change your heart back. Okay, you're born again. You can't be unborn. If you're a child of God, you're a child of God, and you're always going to be a child of God. Okay. I don't think that's what this is about. Okay, but there is something that Jesus said in that parable. Because he said, look, that servant, we're taking away what he has, we're giving it to somebody else. Because he who has much, more will be given. But to he that's not faithful, even what he has will be taken away. When you get to 1 Corinthians is a crazy book, but 1 Corinthians chapter 3, we get into this whole denominational thing where some people are like, hey, I'm better than you because I follow Paul and you only follow Apollos and blah, 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 blah. And Paul thinks this is really ridiculous. And he starts talking about this in verse 5. What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed as the Lord assigned to each. You catching the key words? Again, Paul, he's an apostle. He's carrying on the traditions of Jesus. He's using the same language. He's hinting back at this teaching where the master assigned to his servants a responsibility. And he's saying, look, you guys are all impressed by who baptized you, but who cares? Because we're just servants as the Lord assigned to us. And the reason why you believed is not because I did, but because God decided that it was going to be through my ministry that you were going to come to know him. Verse 6, and Paul's going to go through two metaphors. Is it a metaphor or an analogy? I'm not great at this. Metaphors, I think. He's going to talk about a garden, he's going to talk about a building. So here we go. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. Okay, I did an important thing. I put the seed in the ground. Apollos did an important thing. He watered it, but guess what? It wasn't me putting the seed in the ground or Apollos putting the seed in the ground that resulted in you believing. It was the work of God. God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but it is God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive what? His wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, God's building. Again, this is all the language of Jesus coming through the teachings of Paul, because that's what Paul taught. Okay? We're all different service. We're assigned different responsibilities. We work, we labor, and we receive a wage based on that work that was assigned to us by the boss. And not only can we talk about this like a garden, but we can also talk about it like it was a building. Verse 10, according to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master building, I laid a foundation and someone else is building upon it. He's like, you know what, guys? I planted your church. I showed up at Corinth. There were no followers of Christ. And I taught and I preached and I ministered to people and people believed, and now there was a church. But then I left, other people came in, and other people are now building on that foundation that I laid. Verse 10b, let each one take care how he builds on it. Saying, hey, be careful how you build on the foundation that I laid. Verse 11, for no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on that foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it. And I'm going to stop at that comma. Okay, again, he's saying, like, I planted this church. I laid the foundations. Jesus Christ. Okay? Other people are coming in and now are building on it. And you need to be careful how you build on it. Because he says, look, here's the things that you can bring to this foundation and build. You can bring gold, you can build silver, you can bring precious stones, or you can bring wood and hay and stubble. You can bring things that have value, or you can bring things that don't. And everyone's work is going to be tested, verse 13. And this is a really, really strange metaphor. But Paul is saying, here's the test. We're going to burn the building down. But again, there's a reason why he's bringing fire in here. Okay? Verse 13, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. Okay, so if I got gold, if I got silver, if I got precious stones, and if I got wood, hay, and stubble, and I light it all on fire, what's going to survive? Gold, silver, precious stones. Okay, the things that have value. And so, at the end of it all, when God says, all right, let's see what your life was worth, and the building is set on fire, if there was something of value that we brought to that foundation, it says he will receive a reward. Okay? Again, the servant made 5 more talents. Hey, you know what? I'm going to set you over something that's really important. Verse 15. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss. Okay? Remember, what happened? That servant who had the 1 talent, and I should have gone to Luke, but I only have so much time. That was taken away from him. Though he himself will be saved. Okay, this is not salvation, but only as through fire. It's like someone pulls you out of the burning building. And again, this is not about salvation. Okay, all these guys are getting in, if that's what's important. But the question is, when that moment comes and the master sits down and says, what did you do with what I gave you according to your ability? Do you want to be the person who hears, well done, good and faithful servant? Because you did something with what I gave you, I'm going to have something more important for you to do now in the kingdom. Or do we want to be the guy that God says, well, you weren't faithful to what I gave you, so I'm taking away what I gave you and giving it to somebody else and going into the kingdom with less responsibility than he's giving us now in this world. Okay, go read Luke chapter 19. This isn't crazy. Just read what it says. And so again, this is like, we're moving past the salvation piece of it. Okay, this is not about, am I going to heaven or am I going to hell? Are the good things going to happen to me or the bad things are going to happen to me? This is about when it is time for me to enter into the kingdom, and whatever it is that God has in store for me then, do I want more responsibility than I have now? Do I want a greater relationship with my master? Or do I want less? And that is what I believe Christ and Paul have put before us today. And so the master, he left. 32, 33, nailing the dates a little hard, but it was about 2,000 years ago. He's been gone for a while. We don't know when he's coming back. We know he's a good master. He's not a hard master. He's a good master. So we don't have to worry about screwing anything up because he knew what we were capable of. He knew our ability. He gave us to us according to our ability, and now he's just waiting to see if we're faithful or not. And because he's a good master, we don't need to be afraid. We don't need to hide what it is that he has given to us. We can go out and we can invest it, and we can find a return. And for those that take the things that God has given to them and makes it grow, those are the people that he gives more. In this life, and I think in the next. And so where do we want to be? And that is the encouragement today. So I'm going to pray. Heavenly Father, if it was just that you saved us and said, you know what? You're a sinner. You can't save yourself. So I'm going to send my son to die for you. And I'm going to cleanse you. And then you can be in a relationship with me that's going to last for all eternity. That would be enough. But in your grace, you have said, not only are you going to save us, but you are going to invite us to come alongside you as fellow workers to save other people. And you're going to pay us. Like you're for doing what you wanted us to do anyway, and that you gave us to do, and that the Holy Spirit is indwelling us, empowering us. Even though it's all through what you have done and what you've empowered, you're still going to reward us. Because you want that relationship with us. And that is unbelievably amazing. And Father, I just pray that your Spirit would stir in our hearts, and just getting in isn't good enough, but that we would all desire to be the good and faithful servant, who, because we were faithful over little, you have something even bigger than that in store for us, and that we can forever enter into your joy. I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.